Kash Lee Kelly used to be a member of the Latin Kings gang in Chicago. Tell me a little bit about the neighborhood you grew up in and what initially got you into this gang.
Well, where I grew up, there was always Latin Kings around. That's who raised me up. My dad wasn't around when I grew up because he was murdered when I was very young, far back before I can even remember. I had a stepfather who really didn't like me too much because I was black. And in the neighborhood I grew up in, them guys protected me. They brought me up. They made me feel welcome. They made me feel family. And that's what led me ultimately into becoming a Latin King. It's just that's what I knew. And they treated me better than my own family did.
So I was going to ask you about your relationship with your dad, because I've often said that America doesn't have a violence problem, it has a gang problem. And it doesn't really have a gang problem, it has a fatherlessness
Fatherless
problem.
problem. I agree.
And I was going to ask you, that lack of a strong father figure in your life led you to look for somebody
Yes.
or something to fill that void, right?
Yes.
So what did that lead to as you came up in the Latin Kings? You have to understand, most of the
It,
people you're talking to here, at least most of the people that watch my show, come from that other America that knows nothing of the kind of life that you led. So explain that to us.
well, I mean, to me, it was normal. It was normal to go outside and hear gunshots. It was normal to drop down when you walk into the corner store because somebody was shooting. It was normal to get into fights with people, even at the age of 7, 8 years old. It was normal to get into fights with kids that were in school that were wearing different colors or wearing their hat the wrong way. It was all normal. Drugs was normal. Guns was normal. Violence was normal. I didn't see anything wrong with it. I actually thought it was kind of cool growing up. I thought it was fun because I was always trying to be the toughest one. And I was in a lot of fights. And we were taught to stay away from the police, don't talk to the police, to look out for one another. And even then, you didn't see the hypocrisy until you got older. When I got older is when I seen that that's not actually what it is. They don't look out for you. You get used. And I got used. I got used to make money. I got used to cause violence. And it was wrong. I'm not going to say I wish it never happened because it made me who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It made me exactly who I am today. And for me to be able to speak to people about it and also bridge the gap for people like you said that ain't never been out there. They don't know anything about it. So that
Right.
they can see that life is very real for a lot of people even today, for a lot of children, more importantly. Because grown man, you could get out. You can make a difference in your life. You could change if you want to. And that was the thing. A lot of people like me stay where they are and stay comfortable. And I couldn't allow myself to be that once I had children because not having a father affected me that way. And I said, if I ever have kids, I'm going to be the father that I always wanted. So
So I was
it's a
going to
real
ask you
bad
what
situation.
got you out of that. It was starting to have children.
Yes, my children. And not
Wow.
just that, I started going to church and reading different literature, especially the Bible. The Bible was a big thing for me. I felt God pulling me away from there and my
Interesting.
heart. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm kind of struck by, it seems like every young man, I've got 3 boys. How many boys do you have?
I got
So,
5 boys. I'm counting children that aren't biologically mine as well. Biologically, I have 4 boys, but all together, I've got 5 boys.
I got you. And I've got 3, 2 are biological, one's adopted. One thing I've noticed in any boy that you meet anywhere in the world is that boys are filled with testosterone. They have this free floating energy that they've got to get out.
Yeah.
They're aggressive by nature. And that's not nurture so much, although nurture can increase or decrease that aggressiveness. You can try to squeeze it out of a boy, or you can try to channel it into something healthy, or it can be used for negative things. What I've noticed is that every young man at some point starts to ask himself that question, like, what do I have to do to prove myself to the world around me? What do I have to do to make people know that I'm a man, that I've got what it takes? And we all try to answer those questions differently. Sometimes the manifestations of that are very negative. They're harmful to
Yeah.
society at large and to ourselves. In my case, we used to do a lot of stupid things. I was a latchkey kid, so my parents weren't around to catch me doing a lot of these things. We would play this game where we'd climb up on the roof of the house, 1-story ranch house, and we had these bushes that grew right up to the eaves, you know?
Yeah.
And so we played this game where you had to stand there and have your hands down by your sides and dive into the bush head first. If you stuck, you won. If you fell out, you had to do it again. We just destroyed those bushes. When I think about that, like, there just were some connections that were not being made in here, man.
Yeah.
But pain is a good teacher. What doesn't kill you makes you smarter, if not
Yes.
stronger, hopefully. Uh, and but I also saw a lot of very negative, destructive ways of trying to prove one's manhood in my culture, which was different from yours. But if you're though, from what you're describing, it sounds like that's basically what young men were doing is they were trying to
Hmm.
answer that question, and the path they were shown to prove yourself as a man is to
Hmm.
engage in violence, engage in criminal activity. And there wasn't a dad around to go, stop that and smack you upside the head and
Right.
teach you the right way to channel that aggressiveness into something
Well,
else.
well, and see, that's where it's funny at because I had my stepdad, right? But here's where it gets careful with how you raise your children because my stepdad treated me differently than he treated his own children.
Mm.
Even if children that have fathers, if their father's not being a father, then that child will still feel the same way as someone who doesn't have one.
Yeah.
And it'll actually push him out even more to want to go and do the things that I did. And I think that's very important to touch on because it's not just the fatherless, it's the fathers that are absent while being there, or the
Yeah.
fathers that are too hard while being there. So that's a
Mhm.
big thing. And it did. Like my
Yeah, you can
father,
really crush a kid's spirit by being too overbearing on him, but you
yeah,
also, a kid needs guardrails in his life. And I think when you
yes,
give a kid those guardrails, he feels secure within them.
definitely.
And he knows if I go too far this way, I'm going to bounce off that and it's going to hurt. It feels a lot safer than if there's no guardrails and there's just a
You're right.
cliff there for you to plummet
Oh
off.
no, you're definitely right. Because with my children, they have structure, they got guardrails, they
Right.
know. It's just like I don't do like how my stepfather did me, like the
Mhm.
beatings or the language that was used
Mhm.
towards me to directly degrade me or make me feel less than I was, or less than the children that were around me that were his. You're
And,
definitely right.
and you know what I've found when a father is directly degrading to his children, I think that comes from a place of insecurity on his part. I think
Definitely.
because I've done things in raising my boys that I'm not proud of, where I've been too harsh with them, or where I've said an unkind word, or something I really didn't mean, or that I knew later upon reflection was not edifying to my son. And I had to go back and apologize to him and tell him I was wrong. But when I really think about my motivations, it's because my son embarrassed me, or I was afraid he would embarrass me. It wasn't about what's best for him. It was about, I don't want to get embarrassed. It was, I'm too insecure to face the the opinions of the people that I really don't care about. It's either that or it's just flat out passivity on my part for not being willing to expend the energy to do the right thing and to stand up and either tell my son, look, that was wrong, not you're wrong, not you're worthless, but that was a worthless thing to do. I just
Yes.
had a conversation actually the other day with one of my sons, and it went really well. My sons are older now, and I think that they finally are starting to get like, hey, dude, I'm on your side in this. I want what's best for you. We're both fighting for the same thing. And guess what? I've been down the road before, so I know where all the potholes are, man. And I
Yep.
don't want you to fall into this big pit that I fell into. So I'm trying to help you go around it, right? So that's why you need to listen to me. But I kind of had to get on my son about something. I felt like he was being passive in an area in his life and needed to step up. He trusts me enough now that he didn't get defensive. He stood there, looked at me as I said my piece, and then I said, all right, I'm done. I'm not mad at you. I just needed to say that because I care about you and I want what's best for you. And he just said, okay, Dad, I get it. And what an
Amazing.
amazing way
That is
to have a
amazing.
relationship like that with your son.
That's how I
Would,
love my kids. My boys, we're all close. My kids, they're my everything. And you see them on my Facebook. They keep me, the me that
yeah,
I am now, the guy that I like. I like who I see when I look in the mirror. And
that's
it's
great.
definitely a direct effect of my children
Absolutely.
to
And
feel their
so
love.
you got pretty popular on social media when you made a post back when the George Floyd thing first happened
Hmm.
that was just what you said in that video. It was just a heartfelt video of you sitting in your car and going, look, guys, we want people to value Black lives, but they're not going to do that if we don't value Black lives. And you just were very straightforward, and you kind of broke with the narrative to some extent. And I imagine you probably got quite a bit of pushback from people in your own community. But I think there are probably a lot of people in your community who secretly said, right on, man. Tell me about that journey. What happened and what changed your mind and kind of made you go that direction?
Well, let me tell you, man, I've always been a person, especially since I became a father, I love knowledge. It's like an OCD with me. I'm always looking for the next thing to learn, the next barrier to break through. I'm always reinventing myself because I want to be better for my children. So that's just something that I do. And I'm always trying to set the best example for them. These things come up with George Floyd one day. These people come out and start to protest. And I'm watching it in my own city, and I'm like, what the hell are they doing? They're standing against the police. And it's one of my friends. They're standing against the police, talking crazy to the police, saying all types of stuff. And I'm like, I know that cop, and I know this guy, and this guy's been nothing but good to us. He ain't never did nothing wrong to us. But yet, he's saying that to him, and it like infuriated me because I'm like, why would you? Well, the whole premise of it was, why would you guys come out and protest against the police that are good? These police have done nothing but their job and been very cool to all of us. There's not a need for Black Lives Matter in our city because Black lives do matter, just like white lives matter and just like brown lives matter in our city. There's not a racist problem. There's not a bad police problem. It doesn't happen where we're from. So why would you be standing out there talking about these police the way that you are? Well, it's because the media told them that Black people getting killed by police left and right. It's happening. It's a pandemic, you know? And it's not hard to prove that to be false. When I went out there and I talked to him, I said, bro, I understand how you feel about what you see on the news, but let me ask you something. How many people do you know that's actually been beat by the police or killed by the police in Hammond, Indiana? He said, well, none. I said, how many do you know in Chicago? Well, none. Oh, and I threw in there that didn't deserve it. Let me make sure I clarify. I said that didn't deserve it.
Yeah, that weren't like shooting at the police or attacking a police officer.
Exactly. Right. And he couldn't name one. So he was scratching his head there for a minute. I go, so why would they tell you that in the news that this is something that's just happening all the time? And then look at how everybody's in an outrage right now, believing it. And then it changed him up. He was like, you know what, you're right. I said, we're being controlled, man.
Did you come to a point where you felt like you were being used by politicians because of your race?
Politicians. No, I wouldn't say politicians. I would say all of us being used by media, by the people that are, whoever's in control of media, whoever's in control of what gets shown on the television, that's who's in control. That's who's trying to play people. I don't think it's any one politician. I don't think that at all. Politicians are people like you and I, and they have a job to do. Some of them suck at their job, and some of them shouldn't be in the position that they're in. Like, for instance, the people that promoted Black Lives Matter coming out to their cities and burning and looting and doing all them things that they did and throwing stuff at the police.
So tell me about the Streetlights initiative that you started and kind of how you are trying to address this, because you're not, Attila the Hun on the right. I mean, you're really doing a great job of bringing together people who really have very, very different worldviews.
Yes. Well, that's the whole goal, is to bring it back to being an American, bring it back to being a human, because it's even bigger than an American thing now. It's a human thing, treating each other as humans. And it's not that hard to do. When you take out the narratives that they try to put in your head and look at the person next to you and understand that they're just like you. We all feel the same pain. We just have a different struggle that makes us feel that pain. But it's the same pain. And if we can shed everything that they use to divide us, like race, religion, creed, politics, economic status, those are the things that they use to divide us. So what I'm trying to do is say, regardless if you're a Democrat, regardless if you're a Republican, we got to come together as Americans and do what's best for America. Well, what's best for America? We stand up against all corruption. We don't just say we got to stand against the police no, You stand against crooked police because there's more good police than there is bad police. You stand against crooked politicians because there's more good politicians than there is bad politicians. And I know that's kind of iffy to say, but there's
Yeah, we
more
used to
good
say
people.
that politics comes from two words, poly meaning many, and ticks meaning blood-sucking insects.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, but no, man, that's the whole goal is just to unite people under a banner of understanding, creating healthy dialogue to understand if you feel this way and I feel this way, well, what makes you feel this way? This is what makes me feel this way. How do you feel about what I feel? Is it offensive to you? Did I hurt you? If I did, I'm sorry. And that's the thing. We got to own up. When we do something wrong, apologize for it. Admit you're wrong. That's a part of being a man. Understanding that you're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. We're not ever going to be perfect until we meet the Lord. But until that time, we have to look at each other as humans, as brother and sister, sister and sister, and say, yo, we cannot allow these people to divide us and create a chaos. And that's what they do, create the chaos to control the situation. So we got to eliminate that and look at each other for what it is. When it goes into politics, you look at the best person for the job. Stop letting it be, well, you were raised a Democrat, so you got to vote Democrat, or you were raised a Republican, so you got to vote Republican. No, you look at both of these people and you see who is the best fit for the job. Look at what they've done. Look at their track record. Look at all the policies. We got to stop being blindly led. And that's the problem we're facing in America with everything, not just politics, but in the streets.
I think we're allowing the politicians and the media to paint caricatures of the other side. So, you know, when you go to the beach and there's a guy there with an easel and he's painting caricatures, and you pay him some money and he looks at you and he kind of takes the features that make you who you are and exaggerates them to a crazy, funny, kind of silly extent. And your ears are too big and your nose is real big and, you know, all this kind of thing. And then, you know, he shows it to you and you recognize yourself in that, but you also realize that doesn't look anything like me. That's not who I am, right?
Yes, that is the perfect analogy.
I think that's what the politicians and the media are doing, is that they're painting a caricature of the people on the other side. And look, we can disagree on the nature of reality all we want. We can disagree on when does life begin, at conception or at birth, and, you know, whatever. But what we have to understand is that the person that I'm arguing with, or many times just arguing at, is a human being with a mind, will, and emotions. And if we can find something so that we can get to know each other, then we can bridge that gap. And the only way that I have found, look, I was in Syria and was literally serving water to ISIS fighters who had given themselves up. Now, these are guys who have been murdering people, raping women, and cutting people's heads off, and would have gladly, only moments before, would have gladly beheaded me with a knife. But they had surrendered because it was either that or they were going to get killed. And so they were lined up and they're sitting there out there in the desert in the hot sun, and they're exhausted and dehydrated. And I looked at those people and I thought, those people are my enemy. And I would like nothing more than to put a bullet in their brains. That would be justice. But you know what? Justice is not up to me. It's not my job to administer justice right now.
That's right.
It's my job to administer love.
Mercy.
And when I swallowed my pride and picked up some bottles of water and carried them over there and handed them to those ISIS fighters, something changed about their countenance. That hatred that they had, that was just tangible, you know, just look in their eyes, you could see the hatred. You just hand them the water and all of a sudden it just kind of softened a little bit. It didn't go away, but it softened a little bit. And so I think love is the answer to bridging that gap. And we can't love each other if we don't spend time getting to know each other. I mean, I can say I love that person across the street, but if I don't know him, what do I love about that person? I don't, there's, right? I mean, very often I have to choose to love somebody that I don't want to love or don't know enough to love. But I'm doing that simply because I have been loved and I want to pass that on. That's where my faith comes in that whole process, is that because I've been loved, out of the overflow of my gratitude for that love, I want to pass that love along to somebody else. And very often that changes people's hearts. So
I agree.
I just one more question. Just tell me uh, what what's your opinion when you see a bunch of entitled, pasty white kids lighting things on fire in Portland and attacking police and assaulting random passersby, all in the name of Black Lives Matter?
I think it's disgraceful. It's shameful. And what's even more shameful is that the people that started Black Lives Matter won't come out and dispel it and say, hey, that's not what we're about. That's not what we're trying to do here. Please stop. But
I have to point out, in the week that I was there covering those protests and riots, the only people I saw stand up to the rioters were Black people who were out there saying, this is not helpful. This is not furthering the cause of Black lives in any way, shape, or form. And of course, they were shouted down, spit at, they had things thrown at them. And one guy was actually stabbed not long after I talked to him. But I had to respect them for having the courage to stand up to the mob.
Well, it's where you get that whole Antifa thing from. People have to disassociate at that point. When you're Black and you're standing out there with a bunch of white people that are doing these things, and then you try to tell them not to do it in the name of Black Lives Matter, and then they in turn spit at you and try to stab you, that needs to be a disassociation. Okay, we're no longer going to stay here because this has turned into something else. But because it wasn't all Black people that stood against them, because some Black people were there with the mob.
It was actually only 3 people out of 5,000 that I saw over that week.
I understand. But just there being one will encourage them to keep doing what they're doing, because it's in the name of that one's life. Because even one life, that's what they'll use. I've heard them say it. Or they talk about their friends that got killed. That's why they're out there causing chaos. What it makes me feel is anger. I feel angry at the fact that they're out there doing those things.
Well, I want to encourage you and commend you for being one of those who stands up and says, this is wrong and it needs to stop. Even if it's done in the name of furthering racial relations or justice in America, doing it that way is wrong and it needs to stop. I commend you for having the courage to stand up and say something about it.
Thank you.
There are probably a lot of people that live around me here. I'm at my home in West Virginia right now.
I love West Virginia.
And there are probably people who live down this street who don't know any Black people personally, because according to the last census, there were 368 Black people in the whole county where we live, out of about 25,000 people that live in the county.
Wow.
Now that number has gone up significantly after some of the hurricanes in New Orleans and stuff like that. We got a large influx of people here. Things are changing. But as you know, I report the news, and the news exists to report the out of the ordinary. Right. So if I'm reporting on explosions happening in Afghanistan, and you've never been to Afghanistan, that becomes the norm in Afghanistan. In your head, that's what happens in Afghanistan. And so if you said, hey, you want to go to Afghanistan? You'd be like, are you crazy? I'm not going away. Right. When in reality, man, there's people living their lives in Afghanistan. There's women pushing babies in baby strollers. There's schools opening, and there's normal life going on all around the place. And there are places in Afghanistan where I literally would happily take my kids on vacation. But you don't know that, because that's not what the media reports. They only report the things that are out of the ordinary, not the ordinary. Well,
can I ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Using what you just said, how do you feel like people over there are responding to Black people coming into the neighborhood when they don't know a lot about Black people?
Well, I can say that goes both ways. Yes, there are people who have been a little reticent, mostly older people that I've talked to. Actually, I have to say, only one guy in all the time. I mean, we moved here in 2004. Only one person have I ever heard say anything negative about Black people. And he was a 75 or 80-year-old man.
Yeah, West Virginia is beautiful, man. That's where all my family's from.
That's the now I've heard, for example, and you tell me what you think about this. Tell me if this strikes you as racism or not.
Okay.
I have several friends who are police officers.
Mm-hmm.
And after we got that big influx of people that came up here from New Orleans after that hurricane, Katrina, years ago, of course, the cops are going to deal with the dregs of society, white or black, right? They're not going to deal with the best people. But I heard from a cop who said, you know, it's really interesting. If I stop a guy that a kid that's a local kid, was born around here, that I know is into drugs and I know is into some bad stuff, and I pull up next to him as he's walking down the street and I say, hey, come here, I want to talk to you. He'll come over and he'll stand there and he'll say, yes, sir, no, sir, you know, and he'll be polite, hoping that I'm not going to hassle him, right?
Mm-hmm.
But these people who are coming in from New Orleans, they have a whole different view of the police.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I see a guy walking down the street and he happens to be a black guy, and I say, hey, come here, I want to talk to you for a minute. He'll say, F you, man, get out of my face. You can't be, you know, it's immediately. And of course, here in West Virginia, that kind of attitude toward the cop, that does not fly. This is good old boy territory, right?
Yes, sir. I already know.
You mouth off to the cops, you're going to accidentally get tased a few times on the way to the jailhouse.
Yeah.
Right? You know, or you might fall out the window or something, you know, with the police car. And that's just the way it is around here, man. You just don't talk to cops like that.
Yeah.
And I don't care what color you are. But the sad thing is this cop said, you know, it really frustrates me. It makes me sad, because now when I see a black guy walking down the street, I immediately am suspicious of that guy. Because he said, honestly, I have not yet had an interaction with a black guy where he has not been disrespectful. And very often they are doing something illegal. They've got drugs on them or you know, whatever. How does that make you feel hearing that story?
Well, I mean, I can understand on both sides. New Orleans was a whole different kind of place compared to West Virginia. Me, I love West Virginia. Mm-hmm. I used to go there every summer with my pawpaw. But it's not for them. It's different for them to be out there, and especially hearing the accent and, you know, all of those things like that, it probably throws them off. For the cop, I can understand why he would feel that way.
Right.
Because you're used to something being the way that it is. And then, like you said, here comes something else. You don't have a lot of interactions with black people on the norm, and you only get your information from the media. So you think these dudes are probably criminals, or they might be selling drugs, or they might be violent, or whatever the case may be. We're way too quick to throw out the racism card. And that could be on both sides. It's like with the kid, that with a black guy that he'll see walking and he'll start cussing the cop out, probably because of his experiences with white police officers. And it's not his fault, and it's not the cop's fault. It's just you're merging two different cultures, and they're coming together, and then they're clashing. Two different ideologies on the way things are supposed to be. So there's going to be conflict. I don't believe that cop to be wrong. I don't believe that guy to be wrong for being skeptical. I believe he would be wrong to be disrespectful. But to be skeptical, I don't blame him.
It's certainly not profitable for him to be disrespectful like that.
Definitely not.
It's interesting, as you say that, it makes me think that, you know, we all face little injustices in life. Life is full of little injustices, right? And when it comes to racism, I've experienced a lot of racism in my career because I spend most of my time outside the United States. And much of that time is spent I live most of the year in Panama, and I can guarantee you that I am discriminated against because of my race in Panama all the time. There's something we call the gringo tax. If a Panamanian guy walks into a store and says, how much is this thing on the shelf? They're going to give him a price. If I walk in right after that and pick up the same item and ask how much it is in perfect Spanish, they're going to give me a price that's much higher. And it's a gringo tax. We just call it that. We learned to get around it by hiring people to go shopping for us so that I can get a better price. We just deal with it. But here's the difference. Here's the thing that I think makes the difference. I come from a place of, I've got high self-esteem. I don't think about my color. I don't think about my race. I don't think about the fact that I'm a white guy unless somebody points it out to me or something.
You're white?
Because I've talked to people, I've talked to black people who say not a day goes by that it's not always forefront in my mind that I'm a black guy. And I
No,
just think
that's
that is
BS,
really
man.
strange because
That's BS, bro.
I don't think that way.
Oh,
It
me
doesn't
neither.
occur to me. But
Me
so
neither.
if I encounter that kind of racism in Panama, I go, there's something wrong with that guy, man. And I just go, that's stupid. I don't internalize it. I don't feel like a victim. If anything, I'm
Exactly.
like, of course they're taking advantage of me because I'm the rich guy here. I'm coming from a position of strength because I'm the wealthy guy, and okay,
I
they're going
get
to
it.
try to take advantage of me because of that. Even if I'm not wealthy, I look like the wealthy people because most of the people who are wealthy are lighter skinned. In contrast, if a black guy gets pulled over by the cops, and like I interviewed a black pastor in Seattle, he told me this story about how his kids got pulled out of their car because a guy robbed a bank and his son fit the description of the guy who robbed the bank. He had dreadlocks, he was dressed the same. And so the cops were looking for this guy that robbed the bank. They saw this kid, he fit the description, they grabbed him. And this black guy pastor was trying to hold this up as an example of how systematic racism works. And I'm like, no, that's kind of how detective work works. I mean, somebody says I got robbed by a guy wearing a blue shirt and khaki pants, and I come walking by wearing a blue shirt and khaki pants. I would expect that they would grab me, and I wouldn't
Mhm.
chalk it up to racism. I wouldn't chalk it up to some kind of systemic problem. It's called logic, and it wouldn't
Yeah,
bother me. But in the case of the culture where the media and politicians and even your own culture, I mean, people within your own culture, and I wanted to just point out too that I think we do have some culpability as a nation for this divide, for it being this way. And it's because the fatherlessness problem, I think, was largely created by the welfare system because we paid women.
definitely.
How do you feel about that?
Definitely. I spoke about that. I spoke about all that on my video. They crippled the black families at that time.
Mhm.
They made it where the mother didn't need the father anymore. So you could go ahead and go. I got welfare. I'll be fine. And then
And
leave
if
it
you stay, I
black
won't
women
get paid
down.
as much, right?
Exactly. And that's exactly what it did. They forced them out of the home.
Right, right.
Forced them out of the home. And even beyond all of that, the things that see it's there's other things at play there as well, not just the welfare. Some of the problems that we have, even though, like you said, with the pastor, he's talking about systematic racism or systemic racism, however you want to look at it. He feels that way because of things that probably happened in his life with a, can I cuss on here?
I don't care. Yeah.
With an asshole cop that
Yeah,
happened to probably be racist.
right.
And there are a lot of those. There's not more than there is good police. There's way more good police than there is bad. But I've had an encounter before with a cop that had a chip on his shoulder. And but
Mhm.
that cop, that's the problem. We got to stop thinking that that cop speaks for the rest of the good cops. Because I know far more good cops than I do that one bad one.
Right.
So
Well, and
it's
also, I
far
mean, did
deeper
it
than just
ever
the
occur to
welfare.
you? Let me
The
ask you this question. This goes right along with what you're saying.
mhm,
Did it ever occur to you when you're a gang member?
mhm.
Okay. So a cop pulls you over, your tail lights out, or not even doing anything wrong or whatever, but it's just something. He pulls you over. And he comes up and he looks at you. You got tattoos on your neck. You got you're dressed like a gangbanger, right?
Right.
You look like the thugs that he arrests all the time,
Mhm.
who probably have attacked him on multiple occasions when he's tried to arrest them. They often resist arrest. They cuss him out on a regular basis. So he comes up to you, and his automatic kind of default is going to be like, crap, here we go again. I got to put up with another one of these punks,
Yeah.
right? And if your skin was purple or green and he had been assaulted, verbally abused, maybe even attacked by green skinned men, then he's going to look at you. It's a survival mechanism. He's going to go, I don't like this guy already,
Well, you
just
see,
because because I've told people many times, look, I have no problem with the color of somebody's skin. You know what I got a problem with? Thuggery. I got
no,
a
you're
problem
right.
with
And
punks.
and here's the thing. I was just talking about this today. When you go into looking at it that way, I don't believe that that's the thing that happens with the police. with a cop that comes up and sees me, I don't assume that when I get pulled over by the police are going to come up to me and think that, oh, here goes another black guy. No. And especially because of the way that I dress and I carry myself, the way that I speak to him. I don't believe that he's going to look at me like a thug. Now, if we're in the hood and a guy that's white dressed like a thug gets pulled over, guess what? He gets treated like a thug, bro.
I would hope so.
Where I'm from, there's a mixture of everybody. And everybody gets treated like an asshole by a cop when they act like an asshole.
Or dress like one.
In special occasions, you'll have a cop that is just out to be a dick.
Yeah.
That happens a lot in communities like Chicago. Because in Chicago, a lot of people don't understand that there's cops that join the force strictly because they were racist.
Or they want the power or whatever.
They wanted the power, or they were a part of a gang. People don't realize that.
Oh.
They join the police force to help out their gang.
Oh.
They'll take you from your hood, arrest you, not take you to the police station, and drop you off in a rival gang hood to get you killed.
Holy smokes.
That
I have
happens.
never heard anybody say that before. I have heard, I mean, I've been to South Chicago and I've talked to people who have said, I can't cross this street right here because I would get killed because that's some other gang's neighborhood. And I have to point out, that is so foreign to the America that I live in. It's hard to even describe to you how strange that sounds to somebody like me.
But you know what's beautiful about it? You know what's really beautiful about it? Is I've shared these stories with Americans, and Americans like you that happen to be in a different category of life or a different, financial part of life.
Right.
They have received it so well and asked, how can we help?
Yeah.
How can we help? And they have gotten so involved. And see, that's the thing. I can't stand Black Lives Matter. I can't stand any organization that divides a people by race or tells people don't focus on me because I'm black. Because what happens, what I just told you, doesn't just happen to black people. It happens to white people. It happens to brown people. It happens to anybody that's born in a lower part of the world. And you're born into a hood, there's poverty everywhere. It's going to happen to you because you're broke, because you're in a poor area. And it happens to all colors. And that's the light that we're shining on it. But all these other Americans that have no idea about that life have came together for this cause to say we're going to stand against that kind of corruption. All corruption. And we're going to stand together as Americans, whether you're rich or you're poor.
Yeah.
Black, white, Republican, Democrat. And we have all came together and banded together in that. And that is beautiful to me.
Yeah, and you know what's beautiful to me is that when I have gone to South Chicago, when I have gone to slums all over the planet, I know I have learned in 18 years of doing this, all I have to do is find a Bible-believing church and walk through those doors, and I'm with my family.
Yes.
Even if they don't speak the same language, even if they don't look like me, we all come together at the foot of the cross and we have that in common. And that bond means there's no longer slave or free. There's no longer rich or poor. There's no longer white or black. There's no longer, any of those divisions. They all melt away, and we can, and that's the great thing. I mean, that is, it's sad to me that so often Christianity is held up as this bigoted, sort of religion that tries to force people to act a certain way or do a certain way. Christianity is about one thing and one thing only, and that is love. And the 1 Corinthians chapter 13 says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all faith and all knowledge and faith that so as to remove mountains, but don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give away all my possessions and deliver my body to be burned and do not have love, I gain nothing. And then it goes on to talk about what love is. It says love is patient and
love
kind.
Is kind. Love is merciful.
It's right. It doesn't envy.
Bible like the back of my hand, brother. They hear you quote it is nice.
And that's what when you talk about streetlights, that's what comes to my mind. Is that, tell me why you came up with the term streetlights.
I'm gonna tell you why. Because the streets is a dark place. The streets where I come from, they're a dark place, and people like me are light, helping people to see. And that's the whole concept of streetlights.
That's great. Being a light in a
You know
dark
what,
place.
man? Let me tell you something. What you just said right now. See, I try my best not to throw religion into what I'm doing with this, but I also make it a point to try to be that example. Like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. You might be the only Bible somebody ever reads. So I try to live like that when I talk to people and when I interact with people with my actions. Now, given I curse, I might act a certain way, but when they see me, my actions, when they see my actions, God knows my heart.
That's right.
I got to make man see my actions because they don't know my heart. They only are going to see me by my actions. So I try to let my actions lead them where I'm following.
Yeah, in Psalm 103 says he doesn't deal with us according to our iniquities. He knows our frame. He knows that we're made of dust. And that is very encouraging to me because, man, I'm failed and fallen. But
Man,
like my friend Clay Higgins likes to say, the measure of a man is not how he falls. The measure of a man is how he gets back up.
That's right.
And you know, our nation has fallen in many ways, and we'll be measured not by the fact that it's fallen, but by how we stand this thing back up. And you're helping to do that. So thank you, Kash, for being on the show today. It's fantastic talking to you. And I want you to know you've got a home in West Virginia. Anytime you want to come visit, you're welcome to come see us. And I may likely get to Chicago before you get to West Virginia. And if so, I'll try to come see you too. We'll go out.
That sounds good to me, brother. I appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking the time out to even talk to me, man. Thank you.
Roger that. Okay. God bless you. And folks, thanks for watching. And we're having important conversations here about hot zones all across the United States and across the world. We're trying to change the news one podcast at a time by not just letting you hear what's going on, hear all the mayhem that's happening around the globe, but letting you do something about it. So before we go, I want to let Kash tell us how we can find out more about the streetlights and how you can support it.
If you want to know more about streetlights, you can come to my page, which is Kash, K-A-S-H, Lee Kelly, or you could go to our website, streetlightsunityfoundation.org,